Hi, I'm Dr. Karen Becker, and this is the second part in my video series on the myths and truths surrounding raw food diets. So what is optimal nutrition for a pet carnivore? I break my list down into necessary and unnecessary foods. Dogs and cats need quality protein, fats, and a small amount of veggies and fruits. Veggies and fruits are the source of antioxidants and fiber animals need now that they are no longer hunting whole prey. Natural sources of trace minerals, vitamins, and fatty acids. These must be added in as the soils are depleted in nutrients pets need, and food storage, whether it's in a freezer or a pantry, decreases critical EFA requirements. Animals need unadulterated, fresh, whole foods that are moisture dense. Animals don't need grains, fillers, artificial preservatives, colors, additives, chemicals, byproducts, or processed foods. Although animals can eat some processed foods, and granted, processed foods are far more convenient for all of us, they were never designed to consume an entire lifetime of dry or canned foods. So what are my nutritional goals for my patients? To make the diet as species appropriate as possible, which is low carb, high moisture, and unprocessed. To offer a variety of fresh whole foods and a diet that is nutritionally complete and optimal for their species. To provide everything their body needs and nothing that it doesn't, and to help my clients understand the difference between biologically appropriate and metabolically stressful. This means we must all put aside our religious and or political beliefs and recognize that most of us come to the table with some preconceived issues that we will have to address in order to provide the best possible food for our companions. The reality is, most pets live their entire lives without consuming any living foods. They eat an entirely processed diet from birth to death. I think that there are a whole variety of reasons for why this happens. Not everyone believes that food matters to overall health. Many people don't correlate disease with diet. And there's a segment of people that know, but they just don't care. In fact, I regularly hear at my practice, well, you know, they gotta die of something. And the other huge issue is that objective veterinary nutrition education is lacking. Vets aren't doing their job of helping owners make wise nutritional choices for their pets. In fact, many pet owners complete their annual exams without the vet ever asking what food they are feeding. I really believe that health and wellness are based on two factors, genetics and environmental factors. Nutrigenomics is the emerging field of study that links our lifestyle choices to genetic expression, which means the foods you feed your pets will have the potential to either up or down regulate target genes. This is huge. Really what this means is that early identification of cell markers can allow doctors to provide nutritional intervention and return the patient to cellular health, avoiding genetically predisposed disease. Big. Environmental factors that influence genetic expression include the foods that you choose to feed your pet, obviously, but also your pet's antioxidant intake, chemical exposure and load. This includes topical flea and tick drugs, yard and household chemicals, as well as drugs and medications fed to pets. Water and air quality are very important. Your pet's weight, sex, age, breed, and prior diseases and traumas, as well as hormone balance and level of physical fitness all matter. Research shows that the best way to reduce metabolic stress and chronic inflammation is through lifestyle, specifically diet. The classic anti-inflammatory diet that most holistic vets recommend is essentially a low-carb, high-protein diet that eliminates refined foods. But in addition to all of these considerations, pets also have a unique hurdle. Pets have serious quality control issues with their pet food. Certainly all of you are familiar with the vast number of recalls that have occurred in the pet food industry recently, but many pet owners don't realize that pet foods are recalled for actually two reasons. Because something could harm the pet, and this is really most notable in the melamine and Chinese jerky treat issues, but the majority of recalls are because the pet products could harm people. Most recalls do not involve pet illnesses. They involve a potential health risk to humans. Last year, the FDA launched a national effort to test products for the potentially harmful microbes that could be present. The goal was to discover the prevalence of salmonella in pet foods and treats. You see, humans and animals handle salmonella incredibly differently. The identification of salmonella in pet foods is responsible for the majority of pet food recalls due to human health risks, and many people have become sick by touching or accidentally consuming salmonella in dry pet foods or treats over the last several years. Interestingly, there have never been any reported human or animal outbreaks of salmonella from consuming or touching raw pet foods. On the other hand, what makes pets sick are contaminants. In addition to foreign substances contaminating pet foods, pets regularly become ill from dry foods manufactured in this country due to mycotoxins in the food. In 2006, 76 dogs died from eating aflatoxin-tainted dry food, and in 2011, there were many brands of foods recalled due to aflatoxin contamination. Aflatoxins are one type of mycotoxin or fungal toxins that come from grains. So the good news is about feeding a grain-free or raw diet is that you've eliminated your pet's risk of mycotoxins. So it appears that there are a few concerns left to address about feeding raw foods, including the fact that meats can contain salmonella. It's important to note that salmonella can be isolated from up to 36% of all healthy dogs and 18% of healthy cats, regardless of the food that they consume. Many pets harbor this bacteria as a part of their normal GI flora, and therefore, dogs and cats can naturally shed salmonella organisms in feces and saliva, regardless of what food that they eat. All non-typhoid salmonella species are ubiquitously present in the environment and reside in the GI tracts of many animals, including our pets. The fact is, the majority of human salmonellosis cases are acquired through ingestion or handling of contaminated dry foods and treats, not raw meat. In fact, as I mentioned, there's no known incidence of human beings being infected with salmonella by raw-fed cats and dogs. So my salmonella take-home points are this. Number one, dry food and raw food can certainly harbor salmonella. Be aware of that. Number two, regardless of what food you feed your pet, animals can naturally harbor salmonella, which can be a risk to people, especially if they are immunocompromised people. Number three, the raw meat used in commercially available raw food diets is USDA inspected and is no different than the steak or chicken purchased for human consumption from a grocery store. Therefore, it should be handled with the same safety precautions you make when you're making, let's say, burgers for your family. It's all the same meat. So the counters and bowls should be disinfected. The FDA's Safe Handling Tips for Pet Foods and Treats website states that people should wash their hands for at least 20 seconds with warm water and soap right after handling dry pet foods and treats. They also suggest that you wash your hands before preparing human food and before eating. They recommend that infants stay away from pet food areas or pet feeding stations and do not allow kids to touch or eat dog food. The FDA also recommends washing pet bowls after feeding and sanitizing eating surfaces regularly. So the take-home point about salmonella is to follow the same precautions regardless of what you feed your pet. There are a few other concerns surrounding raw food diets that I'd like to address now. Trichinosis is a parasitic disease caused by eating raw or undercooked pig or wild game infected with larval trichinella. There are actually 8 species of this worm. The majority of human infections in the U.S. are a result of eating undercooked wild boar, bear, or fox meat, so I recommend not doing that. According to the FDA's website, larvae may be inactivated by heating, freezing, or irradiation of meat. One interesting point, freezing may not completely be effective for inactivating Trichinella nativus, which is a species of trichinella found in the Arctic. Reservoir hosts include the polar bear, Arctic fox, and walruses. So your take-home point for trichinella is this. You need to freeze pork for 3 weeks prior to feeding it, and you'll be totally fine. And of course, don't feed your pets raw polar bear, Arctic fox, or walrus. Toxoplasmosis is another concern some folks have about feeding a raw food diet to their pets. Toxoplasmosis is caused by the protozoa Toxoplasma gondii. This parasite can infect most mammals, and it's estimated that between 30 and 65% of all people worldwide are actually infected with toxoplasmosis. Infection occurs through the ingestion of oocysts found in raw meat, especially venison, pork, and lamb. You can also acquire infection through infected feces. Oocysts are killed by cooking meat or freezing meat for 24 hours. So the take-home point for toxoplasmosis is freeze meat for 24 hours prior to feeding and disinfect all counters and surfaces after preparing raw food, whether it's for your family or your pets, and you'll be fine. Salmon poisoning is also sometimes brought up as a concern for raw-fed pets. Salmon and other anadromous fish are fish that swim upstream to spawn. They can harbor a parasite called Nanophytus salmonella. The parasite can harbor a rickettsial organism called Neorickettsial helminthoca, which causes salmon poisoning. The good news is freezing fish meat can inactivate both, but it does depend on several factors, including the freezing temperature, the length of time needed to freeze the fish tissue, the length of time the fish is held frozen, and the fat content of the fish. So the take-home point here is to deep freeze salmon at least 7 days if you're going to feed it raw, or cook the salmon before feeding it. GI parasites are also sometimes mentioned as a concern from lay people. The good news is parasites such as roundworm, hookworm, tapeworm, and coccidia are found in the GI tracts of prey species, and we don't feed the guts of prey to pets. So there's no risk of contracting GI parasites through eating USDA-inspected human-grade meat. Most animals get GI parasites from eating poop, or if pets are allowed to catch and kill whole animals, they can also get parasites from consuming whole animals because they're eating the prey's GI tract. Last but not least, some folks have some fears about some unidentified pathogens that could be in raw pet foods. Generally speaking, raw pet food manufacturers have taken on 2 different ways to deal with Salmonella, E. coli, and other possible cooties that could be found in raw foods. The first method some companies have adopted is high-pressure processing, also called high-pressure pasteurization, or HPP, which exposes meat products to very high pressure, up to 87,000 pounds per square inch. HPP achieves microbial inactivation of pathogenic bacteria, including E. coli, Salmonella, and Listeria. In essence, the raw food becomes sterile. The second way many raw food companies that don't want a sterile pet food perform quality control is through batch testing for pathogenic bacteria. This is an excellent method that the USDA uses to inspect our human meat supply. So because most raw food pet food companies use USDA inspected meats in their products, the pet food actually ends up being inspected twice, which surpasses human inspection standards. A third way a few raw pet food companies have addressed potential microbes in the food is through herd health. Research has proven that pastured, happy, drug-free livestock will shed significantly less E. coli and Salmonella than stressed feedlot cattle. A few companies have gone to great lengths to only purchase meat from super health-conscious farmers, which means there is significantly less risk of opportunistic bacteria in these animals. Stay tuned for part 3 of my video series, where we will discuss why raw foods get a bad rap.